Hey everyone, how's everybody doing? So Tuesday Night Live, and we're here. Hey Ryan, saw you on you're on a vacation with the family. Pictures looked awesome. Uh, so got some stuff done last week. We got some stuff to go over tonight. Was talking with Chris. He's trying to get his Nova finished up, and wanted to ask some questions about power steering. And he said, "You know what? Don't tell me now. Put it on the live show." So I put couple little slides together for that, and I got some pictures of his car. If the pictures I was looking at correctly, he may have to change some stuff. So anyway, getting closer to that 1 year mark. This is episode 46. So 6 more episodes and it'll be 1 full year of Tuesday Night Live. I appreciate you guys all logging in and getting involved in the chat and all those fun things. Hopefully it's been interesting. I've enjoyed it so far. Just trying to put the message out there. So I don't know if you guys saw it. I put a video out over the weekend from the season opener, Bradenton Motorsports Park, NMCA, Ross Pistons. I think it was the 5th annual Streetcar Nationals. I was racing in Pro Street in that event. We had the white Dodge Stratus with the blue flames on the front of it. Roots blower supercharged car, previously owned by Jim Oddie. And so that event was the first time I had actually driven the car with other cars beside us. I think I had 6 shakedown passes in the car when we met with Jim, and we shook it down in South Georgia Motorsports Park. None of them were full track. They were all 60-foot, 330. I think I might have went to 1,000-foot one time. And then we came down to Bradenton, and we ran the NMC event and went to the finals, luckily enough. It was quite an interesting event. I don't know how many people actually read the descriptions on the videos, but we had some issues with valve seats dropping out of the cylinder head. So every test pass on Friday, and then on Saturday, the 3 rounds of qualifying, we had to have the engine down to a short block, and we were putting valve seats back in the cylinder heads and lapping them in with a drill, and then slapping it back together to go make the next round. So it was a little bit of a struggle, but we got it, and we actually, for anybody that's had a bearing or something like that doesn't want to stay in its bore, we actually took a push rod, a spare one, and we didn't pin prick it like you would with a center punch, but we did take the valve, the push rod, and beat around the cylinder, around the valve seat, to squeeze the aluminum to hold the seats in, and it actually worked. It ran all day on Sunday, the 4 rounds on Sunday, flawlessly, and then of course it went up and got fixed after that. But I've got I don't know if I have the full season of 2007, but I'm going to go ahead and start transferring those. They're on DVD, so I had to transfer them back to MP3 or MP4 so we could play it on the on YouTube. But I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I got to go through my boxes and see. I should have some from 06 with the GTO, and maybe some from 08 when we were still running the Stratus. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Got to live out a childhood dream to drive a Pro Mod, so it was a lot of fun. Short-lived, but it was a lot of fun. So it was pretty good. So I'm kind of happy to get that on YouTube, where it's theoretically going to be there forever. So we'll keep looking out for new ones of those. And I started working on the motor for the NASCAR, and started doing a video on that. And I'm trying to do a little bit different format on the engine blueprinting and assembly sequence. If you've watched the other ones, there's a twin turbo 383 LS build. Obviously the Studebaker 4200 build is on there. I'm trying to think. I thought there was a couple others. And then the 6-cylinder that I just put up. So every one of those, I kind of did it in a little bit different manner. The original ones, there was a lot of fast forward or warp speed or whatever you want to call it. I got talking to family, friends, and stuff like that, and just my regular friends and stuff, and they kind of told me that they didn't really like the warp speed section, that they would fast forward through it. So I changed it up and just kind of did a little different format on the 4200 build and on the 6-cylinder AMC motor. So I'm going to change it up again, and I'm going to do the NASCAR engine build a little differently. Again, I'm going to try to put more information in it for what we're doing and how the measuring and stuff is done for blueprinting, and hopefully that will make sense and be enjoyable. So little spoiler alert for all my live show people. The block was already bored from I bought it from a old customer of mine that had moved out of the area, and he has a machine shop up in the Jacksonville area that's doing work for him, and he's having parts machined and then flipping them. And the board job wasn't very good, so I have to take the block and have a local shop correct the bore. And what I had thought were extra clearance bearings were actually not. So I've got extra clearance bearings coming for the connecting rods because they were a little on the tight side. But all that will be shown in the video. So that'll be coming out, I don't know, probably about 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. Depends how quickly I can get it put together. We went testing with Bill and Don Bolus with their, I think it's a 33 Ford small block blower motor drive-in drag car. So typically our normal MO is Bill works on the car all year, and then I go out and we do some road tuning maybe a month before the event, and we usually try to go to the track at least once before the event, and then they run the event and they email me data logs from during the event, and I try to make tuning adjustments remotely. So I think we're trying to do a little different. So we actually went to the track now, I don't know, 7 months away before the beginning of the event, and just made laps on the car. So that was good. Bill, it's good for Bill. He needs a seat time. I know from when I drove the Pro Mod stuff, I mean, there's nothing like driving it all the time to where you get muscle memory, so you don't have to think about what you're doing. You just automatically go through the motions. You don't even know you're doing it. That's where you want to be, so that you're comfortable and you know all that stuff is working. We did have one issue. We've been working on this thing to get fuel system dialed in, and Bill redid it last year, and the fuel system works great now. It used to go way lean and couldn't run the big pulley on it and stuff. Redid all that. That's all working great now. But now you'll see I made I pieced together all the videos from when we were at the track, and for some reason the car's got a hesitation off the starting line. I can see in the data log that he lets go of the trans brake, and then the car doesn't really move for almost half a second, and then it moves off. So I'm pretty sure that it's not an electrical issue, and he thought he was having this issue, and he had already pulled the trans brake solenoid out and polished the valve going into the valve body behind the solenoid, which is a common problem, and they get burrs on them and then they start sticking. But that seemed to be working fine, so we'll have to piece that stuff together and kind of come up with some solutions there. But all in all, it was a good event. I think he got 5 passes, and we were out of there by 1 o'clock, so that was really good. So we'll piece that stuff together, and then we'll go over this little power steering thing I put together for Chris. He hasn't checked in on the chat yet, so I'm not sure if he's on yet. So we'll do the drag event first. So let me go ahead and bring that up. You know, I never checked the sound. Hey, how about that? The sound was already set right. Good. Nobody complained about it, so it must have been good. So anyway, this is his car. You know what? I don't think I put the I didn't put sound on there. Let me do that real quick. All right, that should put the sound up. So yeah, so here's the first run of the day. It just had sprinkled and stuff, and I gotta say the track prep wasn't very good. You can see in the picture there the very little water in the burnout box. That was one of the things that was kind of a problem all day. Noticed that, but the car kind of sat there for a second and then took off. And lazy, so on this next run, we decided, well, let's foot brake it and then see if it does it on the foot brake. So this is that. You can hear it hit the rev limiter. We made a slight error on the Dominator. It has to see the trans brake actuation to put the air shifter into mode, because the car drives on the highway a lot. We didn't want it happen. We didn't want the air shifter shifting every time he drove it, so we timed it. So I had Bill put the trans brake on, and kind of bring the RPM up a little bit, and then let go of the trans brake, and then stage and go. Well, unfortunately, afterwards I remembered that it actually has to be up near the 2-step before that it actually activates, so it didn't work. So we made another run. That one he manually shifted it, so it was really good. Pull off crazy fast braking it. So I think this is the last pass that I got on video, and we went back to the trans brake and worked on some fuel tuning a little bit on it, and we actually pulled a couple degrees of timing out. I'd never had modified timing on this thing from the original tune that was in the car before I started tuning it, because we never really went to the track and had an opportunity to pull a plug in. So what we had done earlier is we put 2 plugs, one on each bank, and then at the end of the track he shut it, clipped it off, and then at the end of the track we pulled the plugs and looked at it. And the spark was a little bit advanced on the strap. It was a little higher than past the curve. So we went ahead and pulled 1.5 degrees out of it, and it made it pretty spot on. So here's the last pass, and this is back with the trans brake back on. And of course, it's kind of hard to tell just from watching the video as opposed to me looking at the data. Unfortunately, I totally forgot to get the data off of Dawn's computer, so I don't have any that I tuned on her computer, so I don't have any of the data to show you. But there was a major, half a second lag from when the trans brake released until you saw the RPM curve go up from the car actually moving. And same with the drive shaft. The drive shaft didn't even hardly turn until like 0.3, and then it went just like straight and then took off. So something going on there. I talked to a buddy of mine, Jonathan. It's a training guy. He does a lot of my trans work, and obviously he doesn't see the car, so it's hard to tell what's going on. Hey John, how you doing? Thanks for checking in. So I don't know. We checked the solenoid and stuff. So Bill had a couple little things he wanted him to check: how much crud was in the bottom of the pan. And at that point, we probably need to. I think JW built that trans, so I'll probably have to call JW and see what they say about it. And Jonathan had some ideas, maybe a band adjustments out of whack or something like that. Not really sure, but at least we found the problem, and it's way before sick week, because unfortunately with that car, to get anything out of that car, to work on anything, it's an act of Congress. That thing is definitely 20 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag. That thing is shoehorned in there completely. So we'll see what happens with that, but at least we caught it way in advance and we can get that straightened out. That tranny, I think from what Bill was telling me, has been in the car since 2018, so it's done. I don't know if it did a drive and drag in 18, but definitely did 19. I don't know if they did 20, 21, 22, and 23, something like that. So it's got 4,000 or 5,000 miles on that transmission, because you drive with the drive and drag. You drive so much between. Most events are 1,000 miles between the 5 tracks, and and then of course there's some street driving on it too. Probably not thousands of miles, but definitely had street driving on it too. So it may be just time for it to be pulled and do a fresh up on it. So we'll see. But at least we got we had that opportunity to do the testing and find out what's going on with it, and we'll see what's going on with that. So we're Chris has been making progress on his Nova. I know we've talked on the live about it a few times. Unfortunately, and for anybody else out there that's going to get some powder coating done, if you take aluminum to a powder coater and they are going to strip it with acid, do not let them do it. A local powder coating company here in our area did strip his blower with acid, and it totally ate all the aluminum. Everything was pitted beyond control. He had issues with it leaking and stuff after putting it back together. Sent it back to the dealer that he bought it or was getting the parts from, and they told him it's a pile of junk, unusable. So he had to end up getting a new blower. Let me see if I can pull some. I don't know if I downloaded the pictures on his car yet or not. Let me look here real quick. Sorry about that, guys. I did not. All right, let me just do it. Only take me a second. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with that. And it kind of was going back to the engine build program. I'm kind of in a way happy that motor, that block was not machined properly, because now it's going to give me an opportunity to show before and after, and good reasoning why you want to blueprint an engine when you're building it, because you can have these issues and save you some time and aggravation. let's see here. Where do those videos go? Pictures, rather. I'm sorry. There they are. All right, let me open this up. All right, so here's some pictures that Chris sent me. There's the new blower, not eaten up with that by cleaning it with acid, but he's still working on getting some of the components back together. They took the motor apart a while ago because it had a trunnion came out of one of the rocker arms, and that led to a bunch of work. And then, unfortunately, the shop slash acquaintance that Chris was using ended up coming, hey Chris, you're here, okay. Ended up not doing the job, and Chris had to pull the car, and now he's learning how to do it himself. So I'm happy for him. I know it's a lot of work you didn't want to do, Chris, but I'm glad you're getting to do it. Since you're here and I'm showing your pictures, is this your power steering cooler? I'm assuming that's what you're showing me there. When we get into our little discussion, I'm going to show you something about that. And here's the last picture he sent. So he's got his reservoir back in the back there, and got the line going downhill to the pump, which is very good. And this is a return, which is going down towards where I think it is. Power steering cooler, yes, okay. All right, well, it might be a bearer of bad news for you. So, you asked for it, and I'm giving it to you, Chris. So we're going to talk about power steering stuff. So this picture here, let me enlarge it. Some of this stuff comes out so small. This is your typical GM, Ford power steering type, Chrysler power steering. High pressure out of the pump to your to the servo built into the gearbox, and then a return back to the reservoir, and that's what the fluid does. And this is a rack and pinion system, which is basically the same thing. You have, in this one, you can kind of see the servo is a little different. The servo is up here on this input shaft, as it is in the regular gearbox, but you can see it's kind of a separated unit. And then you got these two lines over here that are coming from the servo that actually push the piston left and right. That's how you get your steering. So that's the main gist of the steering box. You got your power steering reservoir, and you see it's above the pump, so it's going downhill. You want gravity feed, and then you got your return line and your pressure. And here's your basic hydro boost system, which most guys are putting in their street rods and stuff, and pro touring cars. And again, you have a type 1 power steering pump. It can be type 2, either one. And you got your high pressure coming out of the back, and that goes to the hydro boost first. And then the hydro boost has a high pressure output that goes to your input of your steering box. And on this steering box, you can actually see that front piece where the lines go actually comes off, and that's your servo. That's what, when that shaft turns, that's what tells the pump, I need more pressure, and to assist the gearbox in turning. So there's different servos, different layouts. On a hydro boost, since most GM pumps, whether it's type 1 or type 2, have one return, I always put them in on T. I see some people will drill the housing and put a second fitting in. You can do that. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's a source of leak because you have to use like a bulkhead fitting or something like that, unless you braze the fitting in. But most people do not do. They just use a bulkhead, and then when you put the line on, it turns and then it loosens up, and you got a power steering leak. So T'ing is more than fine, and even all the manufacturers tell you T the return. So you have a return coming out of the Hydro Boost and a return coming out of the gearbox. You tee them together and it goes back. Hey Mike, yeah, better late than never. Glad to have you in tonight. So that's the main setup, hose routing for a typical Hydro Boost. Now here's another one, a Hydro Boost with a trans cooler, and believe it or not, that picture of the trans cooler is wrong, and I'll show you that in a minute. The problem with having a trans cooler, power steering cooler, engine oil cooler with fittings on the bottom is the fluid goes up and the fluid will fall back through and go back and forth and come out. It will not fill the cooler completely up. It'll always have an air pocket in the top of the cooler. So you're losing a lot of efficiency with the fittings in the bottom on the cooler. So that's something you want to kind of keep an eye on, try not to do. I know, Chris, your picture, that's what I was saying. I was asking if that was your power steering, because that's how you have yours. You can lay it flat or you can lay it on its side. Let me see here. I should have. So here's from Performance Steering Components, and here they show you. So this is the right way. On its side, fluid in the bottom, going up, and it will carry all the air out of the cooler. So you can lay your stack, that's on a tube style cooler, on a stack and plate style cooler, same thing. Now you can go fluid in from the top because the fluid's going to fall to the bottom and the air is going to come out. So that will release the air. And again, here's one with the on a tube style, fluid going in and creates an air pocket in the top. It can't escape. Same thing with a stack and plate style. Because what I have on a stack and plate, this is a manifold and this is a manifold. Let me make that bigger for you. So on this style cooler, this is like a manifold, like a radiator. So all these plates that go across are all connected to this manifold. So the fluid isn't forced to go through every one of those fins. It's going to take the path of least resistance. So what it'll do is it'll go up and fill maybe half, and the top half will get stuck with air, and it'll never use that top half. So even though you put a big cooler in, you're only getting half of it. So just a way to think about it. I mean, this holds true to any cooler that you put on the car. Oil cooler, trans cooler, power steering cooler, of course, anything like that. It all works the same way. You have to have a place for the air to leak out. I saw on one of the groups on Facebook, everybody's talking about on the drive-in drag, putting the radiators in the back of the car to make more room in the engine bay. Same thing. You got the radiator in the back of the car. You have to have a high spot both in the front and at the radiator at the back, because the lines are going to be low. They're going to be under the car. So you have to be able to purge the air out of both ends of the cooling system, unless you fill it with a vacuum fill. But it's always good to have a yeah, Chris, I'm sorry about that. But you need to have a place that you can purge the air. Now, obviously, on a cooler like this, there's no way to purge the air. So that's why you have to be cognizant of how you lay the cooler. Here's their schematic. Try to find my computer's dragging. So here they're showing, this is like an aftermarket setup like you'd put on an off-road truck or a rock crawler or something. Again, here's your servo and there's your ram. It's the same thing as a rack and pinion or gearbox. It's just different components, and it's all laid out the same way. You got your green is your gravity feed to your pump. The gray line is your pressure to your servo. You have your left and right pressure hoses going to your ram, and then you have your blue return hose going to the cooler, going into the bottom. So all the air purges to the top and goes back to the reservoir to purge all the air out of the system. So same kind of thing. And this is one with a Hydro Boost. Again, same thing. They're showing a reservoir with two ports. If you have an aftermarket reservoir and it has two ports, fine, you can go that way. But if not, a T works fine. That's all the factory vehicles are done that way. So, and from Performance Steering, here's some breakdown on some of their reservoirs. Another interesting note is I don't know why I came out that way, but pump speed calculations. You want to turn your power steering pump under 5,500 RPMs. So you take your crank pulley divided by your power steering pulley, and that comes up with a percentage, and then times that by max RPM, and that'll give you your pump max RPM. So there's tons of companies out there, KRC, PSC, Turn 1, Jones Racing, the list goes on and on. If you type in on your Google search high performance or racing power steering, all these companies will come up, and they all have different types of pulleys, so you can calibrate your pulley to the right RPM, so you don't overturn you don't overspeed it. So we gotta go. Yeah. So here's where we were before I went off to the side, and this is another picture of a regular gearbox. Again, your servo is on that front part of the shaft. That input shaft tells the servo which way it needs the fluid to go, or the gearbox to turn with the assist. And you got your. Now this picture is actually incorrect. You do not want to do this. You do not want the hose to go down and back up. Because what can happen is you can have a little delay in fluid to the pump, and it can cause some issues with that. So that's not a very good picture. But and here's one from Sweet. Sweet's another company that makes. We used to use these on the stock cars I used to build, and again, they make these servos. So if you have a car that does not have power steering, and you can't put power steering in it. I don't know why you would be, but mainly like race cars and stuff. They make a servo that goes in your steering. You just put it in your steering shafts, and then you put a rack and pinion, which they have a multitude of different length racks and stuff, and then the servo will go there. So we used to do these on the dwarf cars with the motorcycle engine. I'd put a pulley on the output shaft, so when you're rolling down the road, the output shaft is turning the rear wheels, and it's also turning the power steering pump, and then they'd give you power steering. Now, and this is so to talk about power steering pumps when you're talking with people. This is a Type 1. This is GM Type 1. Some Fords used them. They come in two varieties. Got one with a keyway and one that's got a press fit. So there's different gallon per minute flow of these pumps, and there's different pressures. You always want your pump to put out about 1,200 psi, and you don't want to lower your psi, but you can lower or adjust your gallon per minute flow to change the feeling in the steering. And this is a Jones, but it's a GM Type 2. And these Type 2s, you can get them with the fitting at the top or the fitting at the bottom. This is one with a aluminum tank that replaces the factory plastic tank. These are very popular. Almost every front end kit uses these. And there's one with AN fitting both sides. Yeah, Chris, you can, on laying flat, what you have to do is on the back side of the cooler, you want to hang a piece of metal down and make a spoiler out of it. So you bring a piece of sheet metal down about 2 inches lower than the cooler and kind of angle it forward about 60 degrees. And what happens is as the car's going down the road, the air gets scooped by that airfoil in the back of the cooler and forces it to go through. So that's how that works. The thing is, you don't need a lot of cooler on it. I mean, some cooler is good, but you don't have to have, with the size cooler you have, you could probably have it almost anywhere, and it's going to radiate enough heat through it to cool the power steering down. Plus fluids, you can use performance fluids, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and that will aid. They'll have a higher boiling point, and they'll work fine like that. But you can put a little chin spoiler. Look at any of your Camaros and Firebirds, Corvettes from the 90s up. Right below the radiator always had a little black plastic chin spoiler down there, and that was to force the air to go through the radiator. Because on the Camaro and Firebird, there was no grill on the front of those cars, so the air had to be scooped up in front of the radiator behind the bumper to get through the radiator. So that's how that works. You caught me off guard. I didn't get a slide for that. And there again is another Type 2. And like I said, all your late model power steering or engine accessory kits, all the ones I'd mentioned before, the racing companies, Holley, CVF, Build Specialty, what's the other one? March. They all use this style pump. It's very compact. You can use it with the reservoir, with that, or with a remote reservoir. Works very good. And here's an interesting thing you can do. There are cars out there. Hey, Mike, that's one thing. I wish I added the Suburban as a power steering cooler. Yeah, it's easy. Just cut your return line between the gearbox and the reservoir and add it in. A lot of cars, a lot of manufacturers will just put a 3 or 4 foot piece of metal and make a loop out of it and hang it on the front frame, like the Mustangs and stuff like that. That's all they needed to cool it. That metal line would dissipate the heat, and it was in kind of the turbulent under chassis air, and it would be enough to cool it. I used one of these electric power steering pumps years ago. A buddy of mine had a Firebird. It was a 93 Firebird, and we built a 383 for it. And he was a painter, so he had a really nice custom paint job on it. And we measured up the wheel offsets and stuff. And we tried to make it look like a street race car. And so we were talking one day, and he's like, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna loop my my rack and pinion unit because I don't want any accessories on the front of the motor. I want it to make it look like it's a race car, just a pump and an alternator. That's it." And I told him, I said, if you loop it, you can do that. You can't cap it. You have to loop it because the fluid still has to disperse. But I said, you know what? We can get an electric power steering pump, and you can still have power steering. And you won't have any pulleys on the front of the car. So at the time, my brother worked at Champion Racing in Fort Lauderdale. And on a couple of different model Porsches, they had these electric power steering units. Now, since then, there's multitudes of cars. A lot of your hybrids, your MR2 is one. There's a couple of Volvo models that have them. You can Google it, but there's a bunch of different units that you could get out of the junkyard, and it is a electric motor in the bottom, and the top is a power steering pump with a reservoir. So you can remote mount it wherever you want, and you can have electric power steering and have no drag on the engine at all. In fact, here's a company that sells a complete kit. Universal to put in your car. And this is another design. I think this one was actually a Volvo. So you got your high pressure port and you got your return. And on the motor at some point they'll have some probably 10 gauge wires and have it turn on with the ignition with a continuous duty relay, and you got power steering and no pump. So just food for thought. Now this is something that's catching on, and for your normal 28 to 3,500 pound vehicle, I think it'll work fine. ever since probably around 2015, 2014, a lot of the manufacturers started putting electric steering in cars. Again, they're trying, they got CAFE regulations. They're trying to get better fuel mileage out of the cars. So they're trying to take everything that's causing strain on the engine off. Well, one thing to do is get rid of the power steering pump. And the electric units, like I showed earlier, were good, but it's a large unit because it's got a pump, it's got a big reservoir, and it's got a big heavy-duty motor because it's got to make 1,200 psi of pressure. So they're kind of hard to put, especially in a compact car. So they started coming out with these units, and they put them under the dash. You always got a little bit of gap under the dash, especially now with CAN bus, with all the body control modules and stuff like that. A lot of the wiring under the dash isn't as intense as it used to be. Now, a bunch of companies are selling these. This is American Powertrain. Flaming River sells them. There's one company that's actually making the units, and then a couple different ones are making the controllers. I will say that I put one on Joe's 33 Ford, which is a fiberglass car, and I never weighed that car, but it's pretty light. We couldn't get that to work right in that car. I went around and around and around with Flaming River on that thing, and they never caught on to it, but my gut feeling is the car was too light, so we could not get enough sensitivity adjusted out of the unit. It was very twitchy. The Malibu's, Mike says the Malibu's got electric power steering around 2001. Oh, I didn't know that. It has an electric motor mounted on the column, similar to that. Yep, okay. I didn't realize it was that far back. I know that there's a ton of people making YouTube videos with, junkyard electric steering units putting in their cars. Now, I don't know what they're doing for the control module to control it. I don't know. But it's the same principle. Up here in this top where your input shaft is, there's going to be a servo. It's a switch. And it's going to tell the brain how much assist it needs to give you, and then the electric motor turns. And it's probably a variable voltage. But that was the issue with the 33 that I was working on Joe's car, was that we couldn't make it. It was always real twitchy because the car's so light on the front wheels. It didn't have real wide front tires, and we just couldn't tame it down enough. So a couple of different times it was pretty scary to drive. Flaming River kept telling us we had loose joints, we had a loose front end, we had bad alignment. I did tons of videos driving the car with meters connected to all kinds of stuff, and they kept saying it's operating fine. Eventually, they agreed just to take it all back, and I left his car with manual steering, and he's happy with it. Now, he does have a 64 Corvette, and they another shop put that unit on, and he says it's not too bad in that car. So again, heavier car. So I think that's what the issue was with his car, because they were the same brand, so it's got the same brain in it. But we tried all kinds of things. I had probably 60, 70 hours invested in that car, which was unbillable. So, excuse me. On your power steering pump, you're going to have a flow restrictor. This is one style. I think these are from PSC. And so this is the fitting where the high pressure goes in. This fitting screws into the back of the pump or into the body. And there's a hole here, and then there's a hole going through this unit for your fluid to go through the hoses. And this sits against a pressure regulator that's here, and there's a spring on that. I don't know if I got a picture of that. There's another one. They give you some numbers on them to kind of give you an indication, because there's different manufacturers have 2 to 3, 5 different ones. Turn 1 has recently came out with this one. It's an adjustable one. You stick it in there and turn the knob to however much assist you want. But what I was leading to is you don't want to adjust pressure. You want to adjust flow. This is a unit from Peterson. Same thing. It's got an adjusting knob on the top. All right, let's step back for a minute. So I didn't get a slide with this. So there's a pressure regulator that goes up against this, and then a spring. So what happens in the power steering pump? The pump tries to produce 1200 psi when needed. And the reason they run a pressure regulator, because the engine is variable speed. So as the engine turns faster, it's going to create more pressure. So the pressure regulator makes it maintain around 1200. You can get some at 1400, 1600, some of the racing units. What happened years ago in the street rod industry is you have all these guys with Mustang 2 Pinot front end kits in their street rod. And that unit was calibrated for a very light car. So when you put a GM Type 1, Type 2 power steering unit that's actually made for a gearbox, it's going to have high pressure and a high volume, usually about 3 gallons per minute. So what would happen is you'd put that in there, and and the customer would take the car and, talking over, discussing or whatever, or figured out on a road test that at high speed, the steering is very twitchy in the car. Some cars I drove were actually scary. But you just, if you moved the wheel at all, the power steering saw it as a command, and it put pressure to the steering, and it made it turn. So what people were doing back in the day was they were cutting the spring on the return pressure regulator to lower the pressure, changing the pulley size to slow the pump way down, which lowered the pressure because it couldn't spin fast enough to produce full pressure. And that would kind of fix the issue, but it would make the pump wear out because now it doesn't have enough pressure in the unit to operate properly. So the correct way to do it is with a flow restrictor, and that's what these are. So you can, if you need this for a situation you're using, whether it's a Type 1 or Type 2, you can do a Google search, put power steering flow restrictor or flow control, and a plethora of these. Almost every power steering company makes them. This one is set up for AN hose to screw on the back. Typically, this fitting would have a 3/8 inverted flare coming out of it. Some of them would have for O-ring for the late model stuff. So you can buy this and do two things. You can get the standard flow, 3 gallons per minute, and get an AN fitting so you can put AN lines on your car without having adapters. Or you can get a lower gallon per minute and make the steering more less sensitive. So this thing is really cool. I like this because you get your AN fitting, and now you've got 5 different settings that you can change the volume, and so you can really tailor it into how you want. In fact, you could probably even make it adjustable to the point where you're highway driving, you could tone it way down to make the steering feel a little heavy, and then in maybe autocross or road course, you could turn it up to make the steering more quicker. Just a thought. So I thought that was really nice because, like, this one here looks like it's a little bit plumbing invasive. You got in and out, and you got a relief oil, a relief out. So you're gonna have to put a line back to the regulator, a line back to the reservoir. So that could be a little bit more plumbing intrusive. So what I was saying before, the other thing to do is on a performance car is put a good synthetic fluid in. Driven, for anybody who doesn't know, this is an oil company that Joe Gibbs owns, Joe Gibbs Racing. And the coach was pretty cool as he got into NASCAR. He's like, I don't think people are attacking all the different areas of the car as well as they could. So he got a hold of some, I guess, scientist or somebody, and they started looking into oils for the engine, the transmission, differential, power steering. And they've come up with more, better oils to help the demand of racing rather than using off-the-shelf fluids for racing. So typical power steering fluid is just nothing. It's a hydraulic unit. So I mean, I have done in the past. You can run AW32 in your power steering and it'll work fine. A lot of guys run AW32 hydraulic oil in their automatic transmissions. It works, but it doesn't have all the, especially in transmission, it doesn't have all the friction modifiers and stuff in it to do all the things you want it to do. But the good thing about on the power steering fluids is much more anti-wear property because it's synthetic, much better high temp shear protection. So it's not going to break down at 260, 270 degrees like a conventional mineral power steering oil would. Especially, if you're going to a parts store and you're just buying, not to knock anybody, but O'Reilly's or AutoZone, you buy their house brand, or even if you step up to a Valvoline or a Prestone, but it's still an off-the-shelf mineral oil. It's not going to have those properties for racing, so you should put a racing fluid in. Chris says I had a petroleum with overheating and boiling thing. I had too much flow. Use that oil. Okay, so you use the driven. Joe Gibbs oils are really good stuff. I use their break-in oils on every engine I break in. They have a hot rod oil that has really good molecular properties that stay adhered to metal. So the whole gist of that is you have a hot rod that you drive once every 3 weeks or every 2 weeks. It's sitting in a humid area where the engine block is getting hot and cold from sitting, and it's not getting the full temp to boil out the condensation buildup inside the engine. So the driven hot rod oil has got a molecular structure in it that it adheres to the metal, so that even though if the vehicle hasn't started, the oil still tries to keep a film on all of the moving parts to keep rust and contamination from coming. And I've seen it used in cars that sat a lot, and it actually does work. It's pretty impressive. Redline, that's another good company. They've been around forever, but they have a full synthetic racing fluid, a power steering fluid. A lot of the SCCA guys are big in the Redline. And Royal Purple. I use a lot of Royal Purple products. When I ran the Pro Mod, we had a sponsorship with Royal Purple, and I really liked their products. Even though the name isn't very familiar, 20, 30-year-old name with the automotive industry, they were a heavy machinery oil company out of Texas for 40 years, and then somebody said, hey, why don't we get into automotive and racing? And that's when the Royal Purple name came involved. And the whole reason they called it Royal Purple is their oils have a purple tint to them from the package, the friction and lube packages that they put in. The oil is very purple, so they call it Royal Purple. And I can tell you it works really well. We ran the nitro oil in the Pro Mod, and anybody that's dealt with alcohol race engines, the stoic on racing fuel of alcohol, well, let's go back. So stoic of gasoline is 14.7. So 14.7 parts of air to 1 part of fuel. So a lot of air with a little bit of fuel. You go into E85, it's like 9.8 to 1. You go to alcohol, methanol, and it's 3 to 1. So there's a whole ton more of fuel in the engine and a lot less air. That's why it cools so well, because there's so much liquid going through the intake ports and stuff. But because there's so much fuel, you get a lot of oil contamination when you're running methanol. And I know a lot of the Pro Mod guys, when we were running this back in 2006, 7, 8, they were running the Redline stuff, and when you dump the oil out of the race car, and it looked like a pink milkshake, like a Nestle's Quick milkshake. The Redline oil was red, and it just turned it pinker than all out. And the thing was, the alcohol had mixed in with the oil. So now your oil has been broken down. So those guys would change their oil like every 4 or 5 runs to get the alcohol out of it and keep the bearings alive. So when we were dealing with Royal Purple, we talked to them about it, and they said, "Well, try this nitro oil." We formulated this so that on top fuel, again, nitro is even more fuel. I think it's 1-to-1, or it's crazy amount of fuel that goes through a nitro motor. I mean, you can see in the headers when they're idling, it's just raw fluid coming out. It's not even burnt. So they have a lot of problems with oil contamination from so much fuel in the motor. So we tried their nitro oil, and I will say that we could run an entire weekend. We drained the oil out before we put the car away to travel to the next event. And when you left the oil sit in the pan, all the alcohol would be sitting on top of the oil. It didn't mix. It's separated. And actually what we would do is we got a metal pan with a heating element in it, and we would put a screen over top of the jug, put it under the trailer, and turn the heater on, and it would actually get the oil hot, and it would dissipate all the alcohol, and we could put the oil right back in the motor. So anyway, that was just a little thing with Royal Purple and stuff. But anyway, you want to put a good synthetic oil in your motor, or in your power steering, and it will allow you to run higher temperatures without having issues with it. So hopefully that answers Chris's questions. I appreciate it, Chris, for giving me the idea to do something here with the power steering. I know we've kind of talked about Hydro Boost and stuff like that in the past, but I don't recall getting involved in to this extent with just system layout and components and stuff like that. So hopefully that sheds some light on it. One thing I didn't do, a couple of manufacturers all had a good tip, and it's something I've done in the past too. Bleeding a new system. So you just put your car together, i.e. Chris, before you fill up the power steering system, but you haven't started the car yet. You want to jack the car up, and you want to run the steering lock to lock, probably 20 times. So 10 times to the left, 10 times to the right, or 15 and 15, make 30 times. And then you can put the car back, pull the cap off. You'll see it'll look like foam in the reservoir, because that's all the air that's been purged out of the system. Kind of let that all subside till all that kind of goes away. Fill the reservoir to your proper operating level, and then put the car back on the ground. You can start it up and then work the power steering, and you'll get all the air out of it. And what that does is it stops the pump from having an air pocket in it and cavitating the pump. So a power steering pump is a vane pump. So it's a offset. If you think about it, the pump is a round housing, and it's got a rotor in there that's offset to one side. So it's tight to one side of the circle and loose to the other side. And it has blades in there. It'll probably have 7 to 10 blades. And so as that center hub is spinning, the blades go out and they ride on the surface of that housing. So it's offset. So as they slide out of the main unit out to the edge, and they go by the hole, and then it comes back and squeezes in, and that's how it creates pressure. Just like a G rotor oil pump or anything like that. So if you start your car up without turning the steering before you get to there, that pump housing could have large quantities of air. And that air means no lubricant. So if the edges of those blades or the bore of that housing goes dry, and it'll groove that, and that's when you get a power steering pump that makes noise even though it's all the way full. What's actually happening is, as those blades are going around in that housing bore, you're creating microscopic air bubbles because the surface isn't smooth. And those little air bubbles are what you hear. You hear all them air bubbles going through the system, and that's when you have that grinding noise. Not a good sound effect, but you've all heard it before. Power steering gets low, you get the grinding noise. So that's a good good rule of thumb, jack it up, cycle that system to get all the fluid through all the components before you start it up, and try to put pressure to it. And you'll thank me in the future. I don't know. I just said it. But so anyways, that's the whole thing. Chris, for you, you have a couple options. You could lay that cooler on its side, put the line coming from the gearbox and the Hydro Boost to the bottom, and the top return to your reservoir. That's one way. It's in the direct airstream there. It's going to be probably most efficient that way. I don't think you have the room to flip it up where the lines come out the top because it's in front of the radiator. You could maybe offset it so 190 goes by the radiator, and then the other line comes around and drops in. So that way, it'd be parallel with the cooler. That might fit like that. Or you can go flat. I think you'll be fine flat. And like I said, you can put a little chin spoiler. I don't know if anybody's seen any of the F-Body Pro Charger kits. Again, those cars, they have, 3rd and 4th gen Camaros have no grill. So when Pro Charger made their supercharger kits, there's no airstream to put the intercooler in front of. So what they did was they put 2 little intercoolers in each corner in front of the wheels, and they put a rubber flap hanging down to force the air to go through those coolers, and then you could take some of the plastic out of the inner fender well and it'd have a place to escape. And it actually worked very well. But you had to tee the filter, the pressure line, and it was a little bit of a plumbing nightmare, but it will work. There's been plenty of performance cars that turbo cars especially that have the radiator and the intercooler in front, and they put the AC condenser underneath the radiator going back towards the subframe because they don't want that AC heat preheating the intercooler and the radiator. So they seem to work fine like that. In fact, your older 911 Porsches, my brother worked at a Porsche shop. The original ones, before they went to water cooled, they would put a condenser unit underneath the main part of the body of the car. So it went from side to side, the width of the car, underneath the driver's seats, and it was probably 3 feet long in width, 1/2 inch in thickness. And they didn't even put anything on it. They just let that thing underneath the car dissipate heat through just, whatever air turbulence is underneath the car. And those cars, you could tell when you were sitting at a stoplight, the air conditioning would start getting hot because the condenser pressure, the condenser wasn't transferring heat. So then the pressure goes up. Freon is a chemical that temperature and pressure are related. So as pressure goes up, temperature goes up. So the car would start getting warm. Then the light go green, you take off, and all of a sudden the air blows ice cold again. As long as the car's moving, you got awesome air. So again, that shows that will work. And like I said, a lot of performance cars in Mustangs, Crown Vics, Impalas, a lot of the cars that were built for police use, they just put a metal loop underneath the car, in front of the rack and pinion unit, and that's the cooler. So, and some of them would just be a loop. Some would have zigzags, and then and then go back trying to get more length. But all you have to have is something to have air going across to help cool it off, and you're good to go. And I was reading through a lot of those power steering companies today, and they're okay with about 260, 280 degrees. So, you could monitor it. If you have a aftermarket ECU or data logging system, you could put a sensor in there and data log the fluid temperatures if you want to keep track of it. Or you can just take an infrared gun and shoot it when you come off track. But I would say as long as you're keeping it in that 260 range, I wouldn't even be too concerned about it. So that's about all I've learned today between what I already knew and what I read this morning to give you guys some more information on power steering. Hopefully something is useful for you. So with that said, I think we're going to go ahead and pull the plug on tonight. I appreciate everybody hanging out and BSing. Thank you for spending your valuable time. You could be doing a lot of things on a Tuesday night listening to me babble, but I appreciate it. Like I said earlier in the show, this was 46, so we're 6 episodes from a full year of shows. And so far, I think there's still plenty of things to talk about for the cars. That's the channel's moving along. Tell your friends, anybody that's in here checking out the live show, subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps me out a lot. The more subscribers, the more thumbs up on the content, comments, all those things help the algorithm to send this stuff to more people to see the videos. I can only hit so many people up on Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff to show, hey, I got a video out. But as the subscription base gets larger, more people will come in. I do have some ideas. I'm trying to get back on the merch deal, so I'm gonna talk to a guy and see if I can make a deal with him. It's just something I don't have the time to do the layouts, and I don't I'm not ready to do the investments on having a t-shirt company make 20 dozen shirts that I don't even know would sell or not. So I think I found a guy that will print as needed, or maybe in small lots, and it'll give us a good indication of what sells and what doesn't, and then we can go from there. Another thing I mentioned a long time ago, if you look on the channel next to my name, it says you can join. And when I first got to the level where YouTube let me put that on there, I used their recommendations, and I thought they were kind of on drugs, but I went ahead and used their recommendations, and it was just crazy. So I've gone through. So if you've checked that out in time past within the last year, I just changed them a week ago. I put them down to things that would make more sense. So right now there's 3 levels of membership. The first level is 99 cents a month. I think the other one is like $2.99, and there's one like maybe $5, $4.99, something like that. And what that's going to do is with the membership, obviously, any money that I'm monetizing, which I've told you guys on previous episodes, we've only gotten 1 check so far, and it took 6 months to do that. It was $100. Although it does seem like it's getting better. It looks like I got 2 months in this one, and we're already at $50. So they won't pay until it gets to 100. But it looks like it's happening a little faster. But any of that money, I'm not padding my pockets. Any monies that come into this is going to be to get more equipment, stuff like that to make this better. I'm still using a free-based studio for the live shows, and I got to chase it all the time. It takes a lot to make this thing work right, but it's free. So eventually I'd like to get a more professional deal, but most of those are all you got to pay for them. So until the channel starts making money, I'll stay this way. But I'm not looking. I just want to let you guys know I'm not looking to make money off this. I'm just trying to supplement some of my expenses. So anyhow, I appreciate everybody coming in, and we'll see you guys next Tuesday. Have a safe Memorial Day Monday. I'll give you guys some more rundown on what we got going on in the shop next week, and we'll go from there. Keep an eye out for the next NMCA race show from 2007. I think it's from Bowling Green, and we'll get some more videos out, and that's it. So everybody have a great night. Thank you so much for taking your time to listen to me babble. So with that, good night. See ya.